All right. And again, we're using the outside de la Riva, and I'll make sure like I'll try to cover as much as I did in the earlier in the week. But and really just not even doing this hook necessarily right now. At least for this technique, I don't necessarily care about that, but more about keeping this. I keep saying like this knee bar pressure, right? Like I want to almost make it feel like I can hyperextend this leg, and this move changes when he's allowed to turn his knee and bend his leg in this direction, right? And we'll talk about that in a second, right? But for right now, the focus is to try to keep this leg, semi-tense, right? And, we're starting off, controlling the ankle. For right now, at least, I have my foot on the inside. And we even kind of talked about this, like my foot being even on the thigh or by this hip here. You should be okay. I would say this, it's gonna probably be a lot harder for him to drag this leg to the outside, especially when I'm like more flat on my hips here, or on my back, right? So, as long as I don't let him like drag my knee like past his center line, then I should be okay, right? So ideally I can put my foot here just as long as I'm aware of like that my leg could potentially get dragged to the opposite side. I would say we probably have to be a little bit more careful with this once we decide to start hugging this leg, right? Because my hip starts to come up a little bit, which makes this a little bit easier to drag to the outside, right? So I would say, when we're here, this is probably okay, a little bit easier or safer. I can push, blah, blah, blah. But the moment I start to get my hips under and switch this to this hugging de la Riva, we should be careful with keeping this foot on the outside, right? So for now, the idea was we're keeping it here. My elbow, once I scoot my hips down, should be behind his ankle, right? And if I do this correctly, my leg is like a little bit below his knee. I'm pulling my heel below my knee, and it should be like, he should be able to hyperextend his leg. Again, when we're doing this like sweep / off balance, it should be like him trying to avoid that feeling, especially like when you're reaching for this leg, right? So if you're doing it correctly, a lot of times you can keep this leg straight while you kind of like try to off balance him to the side. This starts to look different when some of us do like this, right? Like this is like becomes somewhat of a different thing, right? Almost like if we were trying to do like the back take from here, right? And again, we'll talk about this in a second, right? But for right now, we're getting to that outside de la Riva. We're dragging ourselves under. We're switching to that hugging de la Riva, and I start to reach for that leg, right? And this is where I was telling some of the guys in morning class, if I can access this ankle, it would make no sense for me to let go and then try to like off balance, right? Like I already got probably like the main thing, which was access to the second leg, right? At that point now, we're just knocking him down. And though this is not as prestigious as entering the legs, one thing's for sure, this foot ain't making contact with the floor. So maybe if I can switch to double V grips here, now it's gonna be a little bit easier for me to come up, potentially score. Maybe I'll roll him over his shoulder and make it, a 10 planet type situation. But again, if I can access the foot, probably better, right? I was able to break him down, then I can potentially choose whether I wanna take the option to score or attack the legs, right? So the goal is reaching the second leg, getting him on his butt, right? Or breaking him down. Obviously, he knows that. He tries to avoid because there's some shifting in weight. We could tend to off balance him. We essentially try to get him in front of us off to the side, right? If we get the right response, a knee will hit the mat. Usually they start trying to face us, and then we can look to work from there, right? So I'm here. I initiate by bringing my hips under. I shoot my arm through. I go to reach. He put his knee on the floor, right? And this is like the main reaction you'll usually get. Will he put his hand on the mat and face away? Sure, right? That can do that, but essentially he's giving you what you were trying to do anyway, was expose the back, right? So generally, they're not trying to do that. They're probably trying to come back. And that's when we were talking about making sure that this wedge, he can't hop over it, right? He just does something like this, lifts my arm up, right? Like an arm bar happening here, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense? So when we're here, this is when we're looking to bring everything back. I drag my back to the mat, looking for my second underhook. We're in that little waiter sweep. I'm using my right leg to elevate his. As I invert, Boom, enter that waiter X here. Right now we can look to either drop him on his hips. Hopefully we get the reaction of him coming forward. And I get up to my shoulder and then we start looking for ways to attack the back. Right? We can attack the back. I would say in this situation, it's probably more where I've been lucky enough to like follow, scramble, and attack the legs too. All right? So we're just taking our time, trying to find what the reactions are. Maybe he's backstepping once we knock him down. We're just nice and slow, trying to find some direction to some offense, to some leg attacks, ways to heist up and score points. Does that make sense? And it's all starting from here. Again, I can initiate. Maybe he's walking his ankle up into my armpit. We're getting to this hugging de la Riva, and we're looking for ways to off balance, to attack, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Are you keeping that leg on your foot, right?
Let's see what I'm doing. Yeah. Shoulder? No, I would say like this.
I mean, so keep going.
Like,
The next part, that.
yeah. So yeah, I keep it like not on my shoulder, but like on my bicep, and it's probably right. Keep going.
The other leg.
So. Yeah. Yes. But you know, obviously, I'm a little bit careful with him falling his weight back. You can like hurt yourself a little bit, right? So like, yes, up to a point. Like if I'm dropping him, I'm like kind of coming down to my wrist a little bit. But yes, you got to be careful with how it's that. Is that what you asked, Mike?
Bringing it up here.
You could, yeah, you could. I could bring it up here, but if I bring it up here, oh yeah, you could do it up here. But you're probably coming something like this to a side, and you're not going directly over your head at that point. That makes sense. Yeah, but you got to be careful with your arm when you're sitting back. If that makes any sense, right? It's kind of like in that Kimura type position. You're gonna get the guy to push forward. Usually they do this like, well, you try to bring their hand up, basting your hips so up, and then we look for that back exposure. Make sense? Let's go. Ready, 1, 2. Oh yeah. Outside of that, I would say, in my opinion, and this was, directly coming from Caio Terra when we were in San Diego, was, if you're doing these things and the knee's already kind of like turning away, you almost just want to go right into like a matrix back take, right? But it's just like the way it functions a little bit different because of where we are, right? So ideally, like if his knee's kind of turning away, I could potentially weave my foot in front of that thigh and kind of drop this knee to the net, right? And it's not me like jacking this leg up. It has nothing to do with that. In reality, I kind of want to put weight on my left shoulder. And what's going to happen is my left knee is going to kind of almost touch his thigh as my as my heel kind of comes down to the mat, right? And when I do that, I'm going to extend my leg, and essentially either his knee drops or he kind of like posts his hand on the mat and the knee kind of floats above the mat. Either way, whether one of those two happen, my right foot comes behind the knee and it essentially becomes the matrix back take. So when we get this grip, right, like potentially my foot was on the inside, I get my grip, my knee comes up, and that's where we drop his knee to the mat here. And then my foot's gonna come on the inside, hug the hip, and then now I could take the back, all right? And again, nothing fancy, all pretty much the same concept of K-guard attack, doing backside, 50-50. Again, he's running away. We're looking for any attack. Those are like the main things we're looking for. Does that make sense? I was here, I was trying to get to that entry, but the knee started to turn. Right, that's where it's like my hands come together. Again, I'm not pulling the leg up on my shoulder. I'm using it to bear weight. My knee comes up, boom. Foot comes in, I can start hugging the hip, potentially sit him down. Maybe I have to chase him, maybe he falls down. Idea is we come up on top and try to score. Make sense? Let's add that in there. Ready, 1, 2.